June 6, 1944. Before dawn, the Channel waters were grey, restless and cold. Mist clung to the cliffs of Normandy, hiding the sprawling Atlantic wall in ghostly shapes. Somewhere in the distance, the low rumble of engines grew louder. Dozens of Sherman tanks pushing through the foam of the surf, their tracks grinding over sand and rubble. On Omaha Beach, the first waves of American infantry struggled through knee-deep water. Artillery fire tore the air apart, leaving men screaming and falling, their bodies dragged by the merciless tide. German machine guns spat death from bunkers carved into the cliff. Yet among the chaos, a new sound emerged. The metallic growl of the Shermans, relentless, moving forward despite shells bursting around them. German soldiers peered from behind crumbling walls and hedgerows, disbelief freezing them mid-step. These tanks, they had expected panzers, armoured in thick steel and slow but terrifying. Instead, American machines advanced with surprising speed and coordination, guns firing, crews shouting orders, flanking positions once thought secure. Shock, confusion and fear spread through the defenders like wildfire. The battle, the beach, and the war itself had changed in an instant. This was the moment German troops realised the Sherman was not merely a tank. It was a force that would redefine the fight for Normandy. By early 1944, Europe was a continent in the grip of total war. German forces had dominated much of Western Europe for 4 years. Their panzer divisions feared, and their Luftwaffe seemingly unstoppable. Yet the Allies had been preparing for a counterstrike, an invasion that would strike directly at the heart of Nazi-occupied France. Codenamed Operation Overlord, it was the largest amphibious assault in history, a convergence of strategy, logistics and timing that aimed to pierce Hitler's Atlantic Wall and establish a foothold on continental Europe. The planning was meticulous. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower coordinated forces across nations, blending American, British and Canadian divisions into a single cohesive assault army. General Omar Bradley and Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery were tasked with leading ground operations, while naval and air support were orchestrated to soften German defences before the first troops even touched the sand. The Allies employed deception campaigns, notably Operation Fortitude, to mislead the Germans into expecting attacks at Pas-de-Calais, 100 miles northeast of Normandy. Double agents, dummy tanks and fake radio traffic created a veil of illusion, forcing the Germans to spread their forces thin along the coast. German commanders, for their part, believed they were prepared. The Atlantic Wall, a series of concrete bunkers, gun emplacements and minefields, stretched for hundreds of miles. Panzer divisions were positioned inland, held in reserve for counterattacks, while infantry fortified the beaches. Yet the Germans faced a growing intelligence gap. By 1944, Hitler's insistence on holding positions to the last man and his reliance on outdated tactical doctrine left many units unable to respond effectively to a modern combined arms assault. They expected a frontal landing against soft infantry and light tanks, not the coordinated, mechanized strike the Americans were preparing. Into this fraught landscape rolled the Sherman tank. Mass-produced, versatile and mechanically reliable, it was designed for speed and maneuverability rather than the heavy armour of German Tigers or Panther tanks. Its 75mm gun could engage enemy positions effectively at range, while its ability to traverse difficult terrain allowed it to support infantry in ways previous armoured units could not. Yet, in the minds of German defenders, these were medium tanks, less intimidating on paper, often underestimated. The tank's presence set the stage for multiple perspectives of the battle. The human experience of fear and awe, tactical adjustments, technological comparisons, leadership decisions, and the enemy's moral shock. These angles reveal how a single innovation, properly employed, could reshape the battlefield in real time. With these forces moving into position, the Normandy battlefield became a testing ground for courage, ingenuity, and adaptation, a crucible where the Sherman tank would leave an indelible mark on history. For the German infantry on Normandy's beaches and in the hedgerows, the arrival of Sherman tanks was disorienting. Soldiers had trained for months, fortified positions, and memorized fields of fire. Yet nothing in their preparation matched the sight of dozens of medium American tanks advancing with precision. Witness accounts describe frozen stares, hands trembling over weapons, and an instinctive retreat into whatever cover was available. Some attempted to fire at the approaching Shermans, only to see shells ricochet off relatively thin armour or watch their rounds miss entirely due to the tank's speed. On the American side, Sherman crews faced their own terror. Landing under relentless fire, they had to navigate minefields, obstacles, and open terrain under enemy machine gun and artillery fire. Every decision, when to accelerate, when to fire, when to dismount infantry, carried immediate life or death consequences. Crews relied on intensive training, unit coordination, and sheer nerve. The human drama was amplified by the contrast. Soldiers and tanks moving as one, while German defenders struggled to adapt. This psychological dimension, the clash of expectation versus reality, was as pivotal as the physical destruction wrought on the battlefield. The Shermans were not just armoured vehicles, they were tactical instruments designed to support a complex assault doctrine. American planners had recognised that success required more than brute force. It required integration of armour, infantry, artillery, and engineers, PIBI. Tanks moved in staggered formations, advancing alongside infantry while suppressing enemy strongpoints. When German machine gun nests and bunkers opened fire, Sherman crews could adjust positions quickly, using the terrain and hedgerows for cover while returning accurate fire. German commanders quickly realised their pre-registered fields of fire were inadequate. Trenches, hedgerows and pillboxes, designed to channel infantry into kill zones, proved less effective against mobile, coordinated armour. Sherman units could isolate threats, flank positions, and maintain momentum even under heavy artillery barrage. The tactical doctrine of combined arms warfare, exemplified by these tanks, rendered static defences increasingly obsolete. Each Sherman that pushed through the lines forced German units to abandon positions, creating gaps that expanded with every advance. Technologically, the Sherman tank was a paradox, medium in classification, yet highly effective in practice. Armed with a 75 main gun, the Sherman could engage enemy armour and suppress infantry positions. Its mobility allowed it to cross Normandy's beaches, navigate rubble and scale hedgerows, terrain that would have bogged down heavier German Tigers. Reliability was another advantage. Mechanical failures were fewer than with more complex German tanks, ensuring a steady advance. From a German perspective, the Sherman's capabilities were underestimated. Panzer units had expected a slower, less coordinated opponent, relying on heavier ammo and larger calibers to dominate. Instead, Shermans combined speed, coordination, and adaptability. Crews could manoeuvre under fire, communicate via radio to coordinate flanking attacks, and adjust tactics in real time. This technological combination, firepower, mobility, and coordination, gave the Americans a decisive edge. One Sherman, part of the 741st Tank Battalion, flanked a German position near WARVEIL, rolling up a narrow gap between hedgerows and delivering accurate fire into a machine gun nest. The bunker's occupants, stunned and exposed, were forced to retreat under the crushing presence of armoured assault. Inside the tanks, American crews maintained grim focus. Corporal James Henderson of the 743rd reported in his after-action notes that other noise, the smoke, the screaming, it was impossible to think beyond the next move. Each hedge, each wall was a decision. Move forward, fire, protect the infantry. Tanks moved in staggered formations, covering each other while infantry followed close behind, using the Shermans as mobile shields against German gunfire. Where sandbags or rubble slowed the men, the tanks surged through, a blend of mobility and firepower that German planners had not foreseen. By late morning, Sherman-led units had begun breaching the first lines of the Atlantic Wall. German officers scrambled to redeploy Panzer IV, held in reserve. Orders were given to concentrate fire on the advancing tanks, yet even coordinated counterattacks struggled to halt the medium vehicles. Mobility allowed Shermans to avoid direct hits, reposition, and continue suppressing bunkers. Engineer units moved in to clear obstacles and mines, further widening the corridor for infantry and armour alike. The impact on German morale was immediate. Soldiers who had expected to repel a beach landing found themselves under pressure from multiple angles. The sight of Sherman tanks emerging from the surf, Their guns spitting fire into fortified positions created confusion and hesitation. Radio reports from panzer divisions indicated that units were retreating under pressure, defensive positions abandoned or overrun, and supply lines disrupted by the armoured advance. In the fields beyond the beach, Normandy's hedgerows became a testing ground for tank tactics. Sherman crews adapted quickly to the terrain, using hedgerows for cover and firing over them to engage German positions. Tanks advanced in small, coordinated groups, alternating fire to maintain momentum. German defenders, expecting static engagements, found themselves repeatedly outmaneuvered. A single Sherman could punch a hole through defences, but coordinated units created cascading breaches, turning fortified positions into death traps. By afternoon, the tactical picture had shifted dramatically. The beach, once a symbol of German defensive strength, became a corridor for Sherman-led units pushing inland. American infantry followed closely, exploiting gaps, securing positions, and linking with tanks to maintain pressure. German commanders faced the stark realization that the invasion was not only succeeding, but that their assumptions about American armoured capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. The Sherman tank, medium by classification, had become the spearhead of a tactical revolution. It was not a question of brute firepower alone. The combination of speed, coordination, and integration with infantry allowed the Allies to seize the initiative. German defenders, struggling to respond, were increasingly reactive, caught between the relentless armoured advance and the necessity to protect civilian and military infrastructure behind the front lines. As the day wore on, Sherman crews continued to push through obstacles, while German counterattacks faltered under a combination of mechanical reliability, tactical acumen, and sheer momentum. The psychological effect, fear, hesitation, and confusion amplified the physical impact. By dusk, several key beach exits had been secured, and Sherman-supported infantry units were linking with airborne forces that had landed inland. The beachhead, once under imminent threat of repulsion, had become a launching point for further operations. The first decisive moment of Normandy had passed. German expectations had been shattered, Allied momentum had been established, and the Sherman tank had proven its worth not merely as a weapon, but as a force multiplier on a battlefield that tested every human and mechanical limit. By the early hours of June 7, 1944, German command recognized the scale of the threat. Panzer divisions held in reserve, expected to blunt the Allied beachhead, were ordered forward. Units of the 21st Panzer and 116th Panzer divisions mobilized, attempting counterattacks to seal breaches created by the relentless Sherman advance. Yet the situation had already shifted. Allied forces had consolidated gains. Infantry had secured key hedgerow crossings, and Shermans continued to coordinate movement and fire with devastating efficiency. In one sector near Saint-Lô, Sherman units advanced through a maze of fields and hedgerows, encountering German Panzer IV and Tiger II. Crews had been briefed on enemy armour, yet the encounter was far more intense than anticipated. Using speed and manoeuvre, Shermans engaged from multiple angles, avoiding direct frontal confrontations with heavier German tanks while targeting infantry and artillery supporting the counterattack. In several instances, Shermans isolated enemy vehicles, allowing concentrated fire to disable them without overexposing themselves. German tank crews, expecting slower medium tanks, were repeatedly outmaneuvered, losing positions one by one. The combined arms doctrine became starkly apparent. While German tanks tried to concentrate fire, American Shermans were supported by mobile infantry, engineers clearing mines and obstacles, and artillery units pre-registered to suppress defensive positions. Each Sherman that advanced created new avenues for infantry to exploit, while German forces struggled to reorganize under constant pressure. The beachhead and surrounding farmland became a testing ground for this new form of mechanized warfare, and German planners realized too late that their assumptions of static defense had failed. The psychological effect on German troops intensified. Units that had withstood the initial landings now faced relentless assaults from multiple axes. Accounts from German officers describe moments of near panic as Sherman units flanked their positions, while artillery fire and infantry coordination prevented effective withdrawal. Even experienced panzer crews found themselves repeatedly repositioned, forced to defend ground they had expected to hold with ease. Hesitation in firing, misjudgments in positioning, and broken communications allowed the Allies to maintain momentum despite numerical parity in some areas undue. By midday, Sherman-supported American infantry had broken through multiple defensive lines, capturing key crossroads and linking with airborne forces scattered inland during the night drops. German counterattacks, while fierce, were piecemeal and lacked coordination, allowing the Shermans to exploit every weakness. In one documented instance, a Sherman platoon manoeuvred across open farmland, suppressing multiple machine gun nests before encountering a Tiger tank. Using terrain and flanking, the Sherman squad engaged at a distance while calling in supporting artillery, neutralizing the threat without catastrophic losses. These actions exemplified the integration of human initiative, technological advantage, and tactical doctrine. By late afternoon, the outcome of the Normandy beachhead was becoming clear. The Shermans had not only survived, but had enabled a momentum the Germans could no longer contain. Attempts to regroup panzer divisions failed repeatedly. German defensive positions that had seemed secure the day before were now abandoned or destroyed. Communications had broken down across sectors, with local commanders improvising under the stress of continuous armoured pressure. Crews reported minor mechanical failures but few catastrophic breakdowns, allowing tanks to remain in action while German forces lost vehicles to mechanical issues, combat damage, or terrain obstacles. This operational reliability amplified their effectiveness, sustaining momentum through the most chaotic hours of battle. By the evening of June 6 and into June 7, German resistance along Omaha Beach had weakened significantly. Bunkers that had fired relentlessly for hours were abandoned or destroyed, machine gun nests silenced, and artillery crews suppressed or incapacitated. The Shermans' advance allowed American infantry to secure critical routes inland, linking beach sectors and establishing supply lines essential for the continued campaign. The tactical and psychological advantages of the Sherman tanks had directly contributed to these early victories, shaping the battlefield in ways that would echo throughout the Normandy campaign. The initial success of the Sherman tanks at Normandy sent shockwaves through the German command structure. Reports from the front highlighted the speed and coordination of American armoured units, forcing panzer divisions to reconsider defensive positions and counterattack strategies. Hitler's rigid insistence on holding ground at all costs conflicted with the reality on the battlefield. Mobile, medium-weight Sherman tanks were exploiting gaps and forcing the withdrawal of previously considered insecure units. Strategically, German planners faced a new problem. The Shermans' ability to traverse hedgerows, scale obstacles, and coordinate with infantry meant that static lines, pillboxes, bunkers, and minefields could no longer dictate the tempo of battle. Repositioning armoured reserves became urgent but perilous, as Shermans could engage quickly and outmaneuver heavier panzer tanks. Commanders noted in dispatches that the enemy's medium tanks move faster than expected, outflanking positions before reinforcements arrive. A stark acknowledgement that the American armoured doctrine had caught the German army off guard. The psychological and operational impact was equally significant. German units, already strained by previous engagements and the constant pressure of Allied bombing, experienced a collapse in morale when faced with Sherman-led advances. The sight of medium tanks repeatedly breaching defensive lines contributed to hesitation, miscommunication, and tactical errors. Even seasoned panzer crews struggled to react effectively, often retreating to avoid encirclement or destruction. Historians note that this shift in momentum contributed to the broader failure of German counterattacks during the first week of the invasion. On the Allied side, the Shermans' performance validated decades of combined arms doctrine and mechanized warfare planning. Infantry and tank crews developed confidence in the vehicle's reliability and firepower, reinforcing coordination under extreme conditions. The beachhead was expanded more rapidly than initially projected, enabling follow-up divisions to land secure supply routes and maintain operational tempo. Allied leadership recognized that the Shermans, though classified as medium tanks, had proven their strategic worth. Speed, coordination and adaptability could outweigh the raw firepower of heavier enemy vehicles when employed correctly. The consequences extended beyond Normandy. German defensive planning across France began to reflect a growing awareness of the Sherman threat. Reinforcements were redirected, positions deepened, and counterattack strategies revised, but often too late. The Shermans had already reshaped the battlefield, demonstrating that flexibility and operational doctrine could overcome numerical or armour-based superiority. Analysts of the period later described the Normandy landings as a pivotal demonstration of mechanized warfare's evolution, where medium tanks could dictate engagements on a scale previously thought possible only with heavier, more expensive vehicles. By the end of the first week, the Sherman tank had not only secured tactical victories, but had forced a strategic re-evaluation of German defensive doctrine. The initial shock experienced by troops at Omaha Beach rippled across Normandy, influencing German decisions, morale, and the structure of subsequent counterattacks. The stage was set for the continuation of the campaign, with the Shermans now firmly established as the backbone of the Allied advance into occupied France. The story of Sherman tanks at Normandy is not simply one of metal and firepower. It is a story of human ingenuity, courage, and adaptation under extreme conditions. These medium tanks, often underestimated by German planners, became instruments of both physical and psychological transformation on the battlefield. They moved beyond their technical specifications, proving that coordination, reliability, and mobility could reshape the flow of combat even against heavier, more formidable opponents. To the Americans, it was a shield, a platform of action, and a source of confidence in a landing fraught with peril. To the Germans, it was a force that defied expectation, forcing rapid adaptation and sowing hesitation in the ranks. In these responses, one can trace the human dimension of warfare, fear, awe, determination and resilience intertwined with technology to produce outcomes that were never predetermined. The broader historical significance is equally clear. Normandy demonstrated that mechanized warfare had evolved. The Sherman tank exemplified the concept of combined arms coordination, where speed, communication, and tactical ingenuity could outweigh brute force alone. Its role in securing beachheads, enabling infantry advances, and breaking German defensive lines was not just a tactical success, but a blueprint for modern armoured warfare. Yet the reflection is not solely on machinery or strategy. The battle underscores the human cost of war, the uncertainty of life under fire, and the extraordinary demands placed on individuals who must act decisively in moments of chaos. The Shermans, while vehicles of destruction, also became vessels through which human courage and coordination were magnified. Ultimately, Normandy was a crucible, and the Sherman tank was its defining element. It symbolized a shift in how wars could be fought through integration, mobility, and initiative rather than reliance on sheer size or firepower. The courage of the crews, the precision of the doctrine, and the resilience of soldiers transformed a perilous landing into a decisive foothold, shaping the trajectory of World War II. In the smoke and chaos of the beaches, amid the roar of engines and the cries of men, the Sherman left a mark not just on the ground, but on the history of warfare itself.